Today, I'm honored to be joined by Sharon Rolph, an innovator in life's second chapter, known for her transformative approach, Effortless Vitality. Sharon empowers boomers ages 62 to 80 to rediscover their passion and their purpose in retirement. Through her deep personal engagement and structured 5 step journey, Sharon challenges us to redefine our later years not as a quiet sunset, but as a vibrant sunrise filled with new possibilities. Sharon's message is clear: no one should feel invisible, and everyone matters. And while she talks specifically to older adults facing retirement is coming earlier for a lot of us. Those of us in our 40s are starting to look at early retirements. She has some advice for everyone. Please welcome Sharon Rolph. I want to say that you have dedicated your life to helping others kind of find their inner spark, right?
Yeah.
Sharon, what does inner spark truly mean to you, and why is it so critical to our lives?
Well, thank you for asking that. I'm waiting for the day that everybody asks that question. I when I learned it, Matt, and at school, that coaching class, and then I started coaching class the week before I retired. My director that I had run a convention for, he said, "We'll always have something else to go to before you finish one job, have something else to go to." So retirement was coming, and what am I going to do in retirement? So
Yeah.
actually, January 1st, in my inbox on 2016 came an email that Boeing was partnering with this coaching class, and I tried everything I could to get Boeing to pay for it. And no, you're going out the door and we won't get to benefit. But here's the document that I was given. Authentic Presence is what it's called. And they called this process writing our essence statement. Well, essence has gotten to be pretty popular word now. And I decided that people were telling me that I had a spark some over the last 6, 8 years, and and I thought, well, why don't we call it your inner spark or your inner intrinsic motivation? That's a long word to say. What's your spark
Sure.
inside? And one of the terms we had at Boeing was OEM, original equipment manufacturer. It's
Sure.
delivered with a plane. Well, we're delivered with a manufacturer designing us too. And nobody tells us that we can define it. But when we got through over this first weekend of class, they had us standing in a circle and reading our essence statement to each other. And I noticed that as people were reading, there was people sniffling. What's that about? And they kind of choked up. And as it came my turn, it's like, nobody's ever asked me to define my soul before. This is what I read. I am precious jewel of wisdom. I am colorful collaborator, motivator, and learner. I'm tranquil, authentic, and pure inspirer. I light fires.
Interesting. Interesting. That's that's the inner spark. You write fires or you light fires, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to light everybody's fire because the beauty of it, Matt, is that, well, I made a wall hanging and I used to have it in the corner here. Um, and one day I came over and read it 3 different times. And oh yeah, Sharon, when you're living from what matters to you, your core, every day feels right.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering, like, how do I know if I'm productive today, in retirement? Well, there's no boss to please. How do I know? And that's when it really made sense that living from what matters to me being inner directed instead of a boss externally directed, then I get to live from my heart, actually. And nobody really tells us that about retirement,
Yeah.
that we're the boss now.
So, Sharon, let me ask you this. You talked a little bit here about retirement, and retirement often comes, I think, with feelings of invisibility and the loss of a certain identity, right? So what exactly changed for you when you transitioned from your career at Boeing into retirement? What changed there?
Well, um, something that was kind of related to this, I had gotten in the mail a couple weeks after I retired, I guess, a profile, and I like profiles because it helps me understand how we're different.
Hmm.
And it said that I was an influencer. Oh, this is wrong. You got this wrong. That's not me. How did you come up with that?
Yeah, right.
Well, a few months later, I got this call from New York, and these guys were saying that we think you might have something to say, and we're doing podcasts, and we'd like you to be a guest on our show. And of course, I had to pay for being on their show.
Really? No way.
Yeah.
Of course.
I think they provided me this well, no, that was somebody else. Well, yeah, later when I had a uh I did about 26 podcasts with them, and they did provide me with a professional mic. But it, they hadn't aired this program more than 3 4 hours, and they called me back, that first interview, and
Mhm.
you've got some energy, and you've got something to say, and we'd like to suggest you have your own podcast. And so that became my influencing, and I invited a lot of people on, like you are, and because it's kind of fun to learn from other people. And
Sure.
um so one of my favorite speakers, first or second speaker, was a lady that wrote a book, Smiling at the World, and she'd done community service projects all around the world. She fed
Really.
baby lions. She helped at a baboon sanctuary and sang Imagine to some Chinese kids that were learning English, college
Uh-huh.
kids. So I had fun helping people think outside the box when it came to retirement.
Interesting. Interesting. Now, you describe yourself as quote unquote once bouncing off the walls trying to remain productive in post retirement, right? So how did you move from that sense of restlessness to really discovering your purpose driven life, like what you're here for
Yeah,
now?
yeah. Well, this process that we did in class, one of the exercises, in fact, everybody can do. I started telling people this is not rocket science. Just list 20 things you enjoy doing, you love to do. And so on my list is things like baking and uh, listening to music. I actually went to the National Quartet Convention in Nashville one year.
Really?
Um, and when you do what you love to do, life is so much better. You
Yeah.
know, we kind of get mundane day after day, paying for our roof and our car and our education. It's time to remember what were those things you love to do. And I recently picked up a book, Powered by Me, and she talks about burnout and how there's mental energy and physical energy and emotional energy and mental health, mental energy,
Hmm.
spiritual energy. And so I just last week asked one of my friends to make a list of 20 things, and man, 2 hours later I had it in my inbox. But she's taken a little more time. It may be harder to understand that which one of those things that on your list are they do they give you mental energy or spiritual energy? Uh,
Hmm.
anyway, so how did I transition? Well, I just decided that what mattered to me was what I needed to do, which kind of had me calling and listening more to my intuition. What's inside? What sparks my interest today? And it's gotten to be oftentimes I'm getting the hint of certain things I need to do before I get out of bed because I'm listening, you know? It's a matter, in some respects, of respecting yourself, honoring yourself, that what matters to you is important. And you're respecting that still small voice inside of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, for
Oh,
sure it does.
okay.
And and Sharon, many people, I think, especially later in life, they struggle with finding meaning and finding purpose. So, how does your background in behavioral science uniquely position you to help people navigate these very complicated feelings?
Yeah, that's kind of a little difficult to understand or to describe, and yet the basic statement for me is I love bringing out the best in everybody. And I think that's what we feel when we live from our inner spark. Um, uh, so even when I was during my career, every now and then somebody would ask me to help them revise their resume because they want to go for another job.
Mhm.
And it's kind of crazy, but sometimes you're too close to your own skin to be objective. And
Sure. Yeah,
I can see it for you easier
for
than you
sure.
can. Or you think, you mean not everybody can do that?
Yeah.
No. So
No, that's true. That's really true. Sometimes we need that outside perspective, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And in your book, and I kind of been reading through some of this in your book, Fresh Courage in Retirement. Let me make sure I get the right thing here. In Fresh Courage in Retirement, your book, you emphasize courage significantly. You talk a lot about courage. So why courage specifically? And why do you think it's so important to achieving fulfillment? Because I was listening at another podcast the other day, the High Performance podcast. They were interviewing the survivalist and TV personality Bear Grylls. And when Bear Grylls was on this podcast, he said, they asked him about this, and he said, when fear knocks at the door, open the door. What do you think courage is specifically?
Well, the last podcast I had was, in fact, I was trying to find somebody to talk about courage. And I had to ask, I don't know, 8 or 10, 12 people, who do you know that could be a speaker for me for podcasts? And um, asking that many people and people not know the answer, I thought, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
The guy I found was, in fact, had a double doctorate of theology and I don't know what the other one was, but fascinating man. I had lunch with him before Thanksgiving. He's now, I think, 91. And
Mm.
he had been a tour guide kind of person on railroads going across Montana. And
Oh, wow.
he had been a referee for soccer for 30 years and just on and on with fascinating stories. Um, Courage actually, Matt, is I think, a spiritual word. And I was looking for my little handouts here. I know it's over. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. Um, all of these words tend to have a spiritual element to it. And
Uh-huh.
I actually call it spiritual health kind of words. So service and hope and courage and curiosity, wisdom, possibilities. I'm big possibility thinker. Um,
Mhm.
these invite in some help, spiritual help that's beyond. what we have in our body. Hope is like how somehow I hope things get better. But to actually move towards hope takes courage. And getting back to that still small voice that we sometimes hear, especially on vacation or when it gets real quiet, um, the thought that comes to mind, that still small voice often scares you. What? It may delight you, but it also scares you because you don't think that you can do that. Well, I have one of my little art blocks that I make here. You'll know the next step once you take the first step. And it takes so much
Mm.
courage to start that first step. We need encouragement in life. And do our families or friends encourage us? Uh, we need some that do. My pastor
Mhm.
in Texas, he likened like when you're a couple and one's down and one's up. And he said it's kind of like riding a bicycle. You need each other to
Yeah, sure.
pull each other up.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just we haven't been talking. Spirituality has gotten so behind closed doors, I guess, just not very popular. And yet, um, all this curiosity and possibilities and being vulnerable is the apex, I guess, of innovation,
Mhm.
creativity.
Sure.
Companies are begging for innovation and creativity to keep up ahead of the competition.
Sure.
And it often calls on our inner spark to come alive.
So you go back to this inner spark quite a bit, and talking about this inner spark, Sharon, can you share with me maybe an impactful moment or a story of transformation from your experience as an essence coach that has deeply affected you personally? Like, is there something that stands out in your mind?
Um, let's see. Well, okay, this is kind of a sidebar, but Matt, it means so much to me because it's part of why I do what I do. Is
Go for it. Yeah.
the part in the introduction in my book. I love collecting near-death experience stories. I actually know now 3 or 4 people. Yeah, I think 4 people
I was going to ask you about this actually,
who
Sharon.
have had near-death experiences, and there's actually a glow about them.
Hmm.
But I've also on my wall right here, I have put down a list of messages that they often bring back to us. And so I got to the point that I decided that I was going to imagine I'm standing in heaven and I want to feel all that beauty and music and colors and flowers. I hear flowers sing in heaven, and I want that in every cell of my body, just kind of
Every minute of your life, right? Yeah.
yeah. And then I thought, hmm, I wonder how that changes things down here.
Yeah.
That's another possibility I like to think about. So,
That's really
so,
interesting.
so I think when I started living from my inner spark, it felt a lot like heaven on earth.
Really? Really? That's,
And
that's
um,
interesting.
yeah. And I think as our world heals from all this craziness in the last 10 years,
Hmm.
that we need to get back to feeling harmony and kindness and generosity and heaven on earth.
That's so interesting. That's fascinating. And and you talk about heaven on earth, and obviously when we think of heaven, we don't think of loneliness and isolation, right? But these seem like pretty significant threats to people who live in our world today, especially in retirement, right? Sharon, how do you guide people towards building these authentic connections at this stage in their life? How do you do that?
Well, I'm still working on it because I think I could do a better job. But one of the guests that I had on my podcast, I loved, he was so organized with his thoughts. He had been an AARP president for Washington State for 6 years. And so his presentation was about volunteering and the 9 tips that you get when you volunteer. And volunteering is one of those things that is a kindness and makes you feel good. That's a
Mhm.
great place to start when you're trying to, you feel bored or stuck and you don't know what to do with yourself. Uh,
Volunteer at whatever makes you happy.
ah,
Right.
and one of my guests also, she I didn't even know she was going to be on my podcast, but her husband is who I booked, and she had just gone through a really bad divorce, ugly, painful, and somebody mentored her and say, "Well, do something that overcomes that pain from your divorce." And he said, "Hey, Cynthia, we're helping build some houses in Nepal for homeless people. Would you like to help build houses in Nepal?" And she said, "One won't work. One's just not big enough for overcome my pain.
Yeah.
And then what about 100? Well, 10, I guess. Well, 100 might overcome my pain." And she wound up starting a foundation. But that was one way to get past the loneliness or the stuckness or, you know, to replace what you lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And how many houses has she built now? Do you know?
I don't know. She has a fundraising event once or twice a year, and she builds schools in Africa, um, and she's helping teach uh, um, skills that people can make money in, like
Yeah. Yeah.
hospitality and healthcare. Um, that was the two ones. Teachers, even having teachers. So
Yeah. So Sharon, I want to ask you a little something here. We've been talking here for the past 20 minutes or so, and you've been described as you're kind of akin to a fairy godmother. I think it's more like a fairy grandmother, right? Like, you have such a great personality. But could you maybe elaborate just a little bit on the balance between guiding others and allowing them the space to discover answers for themselves? Because I know that's a really delicate balance, kind of guiding the ship, but still allowing them the room to make the mistakes or to find themselves. How do you do that?
well, I have said a lot. I decide what stops me, but people often don't change until they hurt bad enough to want to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I had last Sunday coffee with a friend from church, and I talked to her about a year ago about helping her do the same thing of her essence or spark. And it took her a year to decide, yeah, I need some kind of help. But um, the factor of being curious is a great place to start, along with your volunteering. Um, 3-year-olds, if they want to get in your
Sure.
kitchen and bang the hands together, they're going to figure out how to get into your cabinet or open that door they keep trying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So having curiosity is a great prescription for you to move beyond loneliness and boredom. Um, Doing our own thinking is a huge part of having a good life, because if we watch TV 18 hours a day, you're getting brainwashed.
Sure.
Um, so uh, I want people to realize that there's kindness and harmony and uh, being your best self is such a delight and joy and gives us good feelings. It makes you feel good. I have a couple uncles that older than me that did volunteering in retirement, and there's just it helps you live longer. It helps you be healthier. You're not spending so much time in the doctor's office, and it's kind of in a way leaving a legacy. I know one of the last stories that he told the AARP guy was he became an advocate for some senior living places, and he would go in and check and make sure that people were getting their needs met. And he found this lady that never ate in the dining hall. Come to find out, she didn't have any teeth. All she needed was somebody to provide her with dentures, and she could mix with other people again. And that's what he did for her. He felt so amazing that he had made such a difference in one person's life that just um, filled his heart with fulfillment and satisfaction.
Sharon, I think it was was it Mother Teresa? A reporter once asked her, I think, said, well, why do you do all this? It's just every person you help is just like taking one grain of sand out of the ocean. And her response was, well, I guess the ocean will just have to be one less grain of sand. You know, it's such a beautiful way of looking at things. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this. So, what do you think the greatest misconception about retirement is that people have? And your work is this essence coach and working with people in this transition, Sharon, how do you aim to challenge the misconceptions around retirement?
Well, there's a lot of discussion about that these days, that it's not your grandma's retirement.
Hmm.
Yes, my mom and dad, I think there's pretty much ingrained, I deserve this. I've worked a lot. My dad, he kind of figured he'd die about 73, and yeah, that's what he did. We can tell our body what to what to do, and I never took a shot, and I never got sick, and
Right.
I might have had a cold for 3 days, but that's kind of normal, I guess. But um, let's see, well, your question was,
How do you challenge the misconceptions and the stereotypes around
well,
retirement?
I'm headed for 100. So I, and the fact that I look so young compared to 77 gives me an age, advantage, but I hardly ever refer to myself as being old. Um, and challenging, what happened to wanting to leave a legacy? Oh, I'm trying to get to the point that we have so much more health, and getting back to healthy eating, that we're eating whole foods, and not this is my not living my life based on fear,
Hmm.
that our expectancy has been growing, and there are so many things that you could do with extra years, like leaving a legacy. I don't know, this doesn't fit, but I, back in my 20s, was crocheting a ripple afghan. I made it red and green and yellow and brown and orange, where they normally were just three colors, and I put a couple extras in there. But I'm still using that. It took a long time to make that ripple afghan, but I have it on my bed this winter, and it's helping keeping me warm. In a way, that's a legacy. And
Sure.
I'm so glad I did it, because it's
It's
beautiful.
not just a financial legacy, it's a spiritual, a moral, an emotional legacy beyond just when we think of legacy, so many people think of money, right? you're talking about something much deeper than just money. This is a legacy that goes beyond all of that, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. And what retirees want, uh, Ken Dykewall, he has found some other ways to describe legacy. One is, besides finances, is one. Two is assets, cars or collections or, um, uh, yeah,
Could
things.
be all sorts of things. Yeah.
One can also be your values, and values are can be passed on quite nicely through writing stories about your life, how you learned things. And I don't remember what the fourth one was. Um, well, well, assets and or stocks and bonds and things like that, I guess would still fall into the
Mhm.
legacy, perhaps. But yeah, you're exactly right. There's different ways. I know my dad wanted to build a. He was a carpenter, and he bought himself a kit to make a grandfather clock, and he was able to put that together as kind of
Mm.
something he was passing on.
So let me ask you this. How or what would you say to someone, Sharon, who thinks that maybe they're just too old for this? Maybe they're just set in their ways and they're thinking, you know what? I'm 80, 85 years old. I'm too old for this. You can't teach me a new trick. What would you say to that person?
Well, can you still sing? Can you dance? Can you write? Can you listen? There's I've contemplated that years ago that if I have a chair here sitting here, and I thought if the best you could do is sit in this chair 24/7, you can still contribute to the life and the well-being of the world in your small way. You can listen, you can write, you can dream, you can encourage, inspire, mentor, teach somebody else something that you know. There's the giving from your heart is just so energizing, and it kind of brings contentment and satisfaction.
Yeah.
I want that for everyone. That, in fact, I might still do a article or on the the Peace Corps started by the
Mhm.
boomers,
Mhm.
and to challenge boomers to do that again with all this free time potential that's waiting to be engaged, I think would change the world. Um, so that's my heart's direction, a drive, I guess, is to re uh, untap. Uh, you engage the untapped potential in retirement because there's like 3 trillion hours going to waste over 20 years that could be us boomers making another wave of difference in the world that to heal um, the globe.
You know, Sharon, and thank you for this interview. This has been a wonderful conversation. I truly love this. This is so much insight here. Really, there's a lot to unpack. And but I want to ask you a question that I ask a lot of people who come on this show. If you could go, you talked about your Afghan that you made many years ago, and you're still using it. You're still getting value from it today. Sitting where you're sitting today, Sharon, if you could talk to that younger woman in her 20s, what would you tell her?
Well, we used to make a lot of things by hand, previous generations, and there's a lot of both discipline and dedication and love that goes into, you know, and remember when you first tied your shoelaces and let me do it myself, well, when you make something yourself, you put a whole lot more value into it. I took up quilting because my mom had some birds and flowers of the state squares that she had stamped out on fabric. I still don't have that quilt done, but the quilt on my bed I made myself. Um, there's something so personal and innovative and creative that goes into expressing what's inside. How lovely is that? And um, society has gotten so, what is it, a disposable clothes and all
Yeah.
kind of stuff. There's no longevity to it. There's no priceless sense about, I can't get this at the store. My granddaughter made this for me, and I'm going to cherish it, until it wears out.
You know, Sharon, you bring up a great point. We live in a world where people are used to things that we just use and throw away. We use it and throw away. And especially, and this is a topic that we've been discussing a lot here is this world of instant gratification. I want what I want it now. I see you kind of perk up with that, and maybe you know where I'm going with this question. But what do you think about this idea of I want what I want and I want it now? From the podcast I listen to the food that I eat, to the shows I watch on television, I want what I want it now. What do you think about this?
Well, yeah, a tree doesn't grow overnight. Your cantaloupe doesn't grow overnight. You might get some water overnight.
Yeah,
There's so many things that have a season to it. Um, and I think we've even gotten to the point of people being disposable, right?
sure.
How pathetic, well, evil it seems like in some ways that we are um, what do I call it? Demanding and short um, things that last a long time are have a value to them and an investment in their growth. So I'm lacking words here, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Let
I
me let me ask you this, Sharon. Do you believe that everyone inherently has this in them to change? Or do you think it's something they have to be taught?
well, inherently believe they all have a golden nugget inside, and you're here to express what's inside. The talent, the natural inclinations of something being easy for you versus it's not easy for Matt, that we need you. We need your talent and your voice and your perspective. We're trying to get better at listening to each other, but it it takes a reaching for excellence. And I believe that, yeah, I could learn to do something that's amazing. They say a grand violinist takes like 10,000 hours of practice, and we get to enjoy all the results of all that practice. But to be dedicated to learning and being patient with yourself and giving that much to something of beauty, boy, beauty means a lot to me. And not usually do you find beauty in something that is instant. I'll never forget one of the things I saw on TV here 2, 3 years ago. Was probably more than that, but it was a lady in a wheelchair, and she had some kind of light gauze kind of fabric that she was twirling her wheelchair around with this gauze, and it was floating in the air. And it seems like there was somebody else on the stage with her, but and the music, I was so touched that there was a place in our world now for even handicapped people to create um, beauty. And at the same time, Matt, who's telling you can't do a podcast? You're learning, you're using your initiative. And I picked up at Boeing how people who use their initiative get noticed.
Mhm.
And I did that a few times. So when you used your own initiative, that could also be described as effortless vitality, which is the name of my company.
I was going to ask you how you came up with the name Effortless Vitality.
Well, I think of it as the flow. People write books about being in the flow when it comes out of you like a river. Um, I in fact often think of a river flowing down a mountain and it's effortlessly flowing. It doesn't have to try to flow. It's fun to flow. So having that kind of expression from our heart is pretty good stuff.
Sharon, what is success to you?
Well, success is probably fulfillment and contentment. Purpose and purpose is a big part of life. Changes when you feel a reason to get out of the house. Somebody needs you or you need them. Oftentimes it's mutual, but success isn't just money, but being responsible with what you've been given.
Yeah. And one more question, Sharon, for you, real quick, maybe that maybe it's an easy question, but what about for the people of this world? There's a lot of, especially older folks who lived a lot. They may have felt like looking back on their life, like maybe they're a failure. Maybe they don't have a lot to offer because they have a lot of failure and they're trying to overcome this. What do you say to the person who's sitting there thinking, my life has been a failure. I've spent, 20 years, 30 years at the same job doing the same thing. I've never really contributed anything. Maybe they did something wrong in their younger days. Maybe they were in prison for many years and they view themselves as a failure. What do you say to that person to get them up, get them motivated, and say, look, you're not a failure. You have something to offer?
Well, in fact, I've been working with a guy this week that has been on that far end of drugs and homelessness. He said 7 times. I find that hard to believe, but he's made a lot of bad choices, perhaps. And I think he said he's 40 now. And he started recognizing when he was at one of his lowest points is that there's good and there's evil. Honest to goodness, there's good and there's evil. And he saw reflected on what happens to people who make choices both directions. And he finally came to the conclusion that when he made decisions based on the good that can be done in the world, it warms his heart, and he loves helping people, and he found he has a talent, maybe even a spiritual talent to help bring out the best in people in a little different way than I do. But choices, I can make good choices today, just like I can make bad choices. Okay, so here's kind of a example of that in a lighthearted way, I guess, a little bit. But when I moved to Tampa, Florida, my friend said here, Sharon, before you get um, despondent or decide to come home or homesick, they said give it 6 months down there. And after 3 months, I thought I got this. This is going pretty good. I'm I don't think I needed 6 months. Well, by the fourth month, I had hit the wall, and it seems like my prayers weren't going very high. And so
It really seems like it sometimes, right?
yeah. So I got out my Bible concordance, and I don't know how I stumbled upon. Let's use the word courage to see what the Bible says about courage. And I was shocked when I found like 10 references in Joshua chapter 1 and 2. Do not be afraid. courage, be of good courage. Do not be afraid, over and over. And it moved me to stop my foot and declare I refuse to live my life based on fear. And I started kind of imagining a stop sign about 4 inches from my nose to help me make new choices. And what I had to do was to control my thoughts. Who tells us that we can control our thoughts? And yet, some research I was doing this week was thoughts are everything. Anything creative came about starting with a thought. And so my thought to help change the world is where the world starts to change. That I control what do I want? I want peace and I want harmony in the world, heaven on earth. So
Powerful
um,
concept.
reaching for the good and forgiving yourself. That's another thing. When I started stop judging myself, I'd always felt, well, I gave myself a 70th birthday party. And when I look back at the pictures that I had over the years, I thought, well, I wasn't so heavy. Right now, this doesn't look like a obese person, you know?
Yeah.
Um, when, when I decided I'm doing the best I know how and quit judging myself, what a difference that made. It was a new kind of freedom. And so unshackle those regrets, and make some new choices about what you'd rather have. It then became easy to forgive and not judge, especially not judge other people. We're all doing the best we know how.
Spirituality plays a big part in your life, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, my favorite verses are that nothing is impossible. Everything is possible. Um,
Have
that
you always identified as a spiritual person, as a Christian? Have you always had that kind of faith and that kind of
yeah,
guidance in you?
yeah, pretty much. There is actually a book called The Art of Possibility. I didn't read it for several months after getting it, and I don't know what I was scared of, but I actually was able to get it on audio. And the author's husband is a conductor for the Boston Philharmonic. And I got to hear some snatches of music on this audio book, and I just loved it. It was amazing. But um, I think Rosamund Zander is the author.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure she's in her 80s now, but I'd still love to have dinner with her someday. Yeah.
Maybe it will. Maybe you will. So, Sharon, so if somebody says, I want to have Sharon coach me, I want to have Sharon help me, do you take on new clients? Do you do one-on-one coaching with people, or is it groups
I
or?
don't do much, but I have 6 items out on the Great Discovery platform. I have my book there, which is also available on Amazon. Amazon, you can get the physical book, where on Great Discovery it's going to be digital. But I have a short course out there on what makes your heart sing. If you need some inspiration to get your creative juices going, I include things like touching the water in 7 oceans, or singing to some prisoners in the in the jails, or uh, taking on a roundabout in your area to beautify with some flowers and adding beauty to your neighborhood. So there's a gamut of all kinds of ideas that might inspire you and get your juices going. I also have my pri- um, premier course. My secret sauce is out there on the Great Discovery also, and it is Discover Your Spark, Rekindle Your Joy. And it's 5 modules, and it's the exercises that I learned from my coaching academy, and it after you finish the course, I invite you to join a Facebook group where we can talk about how to start making decisions and choices from your inner spark, because that's what changes your future, and that's what gives you that joy, fulfillment from living from what's inside. I sometimes refer to it as your invisible assets.
Interesting. Sharon, thank you for joining me. This has been such a beautiful conversation, and you're a wonderful person to chat with, and I feel like you have so much to offer. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn from you. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Sure, sure. I often
Oh,
like to close podcasts with this statement, and it reflects a little bit on your last question. As if this is by Thomas Wolfe, if one
mhm.
has a talent and fails to use it, one has failed. If one has a talent and partially uses it, one has partially failed. If one has a talent and finds somehow to use the whole of it, they have gloriously succeeded and won a satisfaction few people ever know.
That's beautiful, isn't it? Isn't that beautiful? Sharon, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. So it's been an absolute honor to have this conversation with Sharon Rolph and to hear her thoughts on finding your inner spark. And, it's so much that we could learn at all ages. And what can we take away from this? That we can be peaceful and that we can be calm and that we can find that motivation no matter where we are, no matter who we are, no matter what we're doing. We can find that motivation to do good. And I really am grateful to have had this almost an hour to talk with Sharon and to ask her some questions about what it means to live a high performance life at any age, even after retirement. If you'd like to sponsor this show, if you'd like to be part of this community and reach these thought thinkers, please reach out to me. My email is matt@mattpierceblog.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you about bringing you on board. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And also show Sharon some love on social media as well. We'll see you in the next podcast.